Thank you very much to Rebecca and the team for the invitation to talk this afternoon about one of the foundation projects, the Heritage Connector. And I'm going to talk through how we're running the project, which is obviously just one way of doing things, but I hope there'll be enough in there that will be helpful for you when you're thinking about setting up your own projects and proposals. Okay, let's start the slideshow. Okay, so the project's called the Heritage Connector. We've added a subtitle so that it's a bit more explicable what we're doing, transforming text into data to extract meaning and make connections. And as I said, the project's led by the Science Museum Group, and the funding was awarded of £201,000. The project's running for 21 months, and we started in February 2020 this year, so we're about a third of the way through so far. It's probably been a bit of a bumpier ride than any of us were expecting, but that's true in so many areas of life at the moment. So given the size of the funding and the length of time that they're running, the foundation projects are obviously very different in scale from the discovery projects, but they are addressing some of the same challenges, and some of our findings will help to feed into the programme as a whole. So the project team, very important. The PI at the Science Museum is John Stack, and our two technical developers there are Callian Duttier and Jamie Unwin, without whom none of this would be possible, as I say. And at the Victoria and Albert Museum, we're working with Angela Wolfe and Richard Palmer. And then at the University of London, where I'm based, there's me as a co-investigator and Rhiannon Lewis. So the project's research questions there are more of them than this, but I've distilled these down to the most important ones, I think. How can existing digital tools and methods be used to build relationships at scale between digitized collection objects and other content sources? And there we're thinking of things like other museum catalogues, but also Wikidata, vocabularies, taxonomies, authority files, and so on. How might confidence in these relationships affect their usefulness in research and discovery? Essentially, do people trust them? And trusting algorithms, of course, is very topical at the moment for universities. So I think issues of trust and confidence are very important when we're building these links. What's the best use of human input in supporting this approach? What skills are required? Who can get involved and when? So that's maximising the potential and the skills of the people who might want to contribute to building these connections, and not wasting their time doing work that a computer can do very effectively, and potentially freeing people up to do things that are more interesting and where they can contribute and learn more. What gaps and biases emerge when these relationships are created, and which hitherto unexpected connections are made? The unexpected connections are the exciting part, I think, but gaps and biases are also hugely important. And we were very conscious when we were designing the project, and this has become more apparent as we've gone along, that we don't just want to reinforce existing hierarchies in the data by connecting people and objects that are already very well known and very well described, but actually highlighting where that's not happening and trying to expose new items in catalogues and collections. And finally, how can these new automatically established relationships help museums to gain greater understanding of how their collections are being used and interpreted at the moment, and how they might be interpreted and used in the future? The main project activities are to conduct a review of relevant literature and tools, which is really my responsibility on the project. We originally slated that for the first 4 months, but it's been quite apparent that we're going to have to keep doing that really through the whole project, because there's so much new and emerging literature in this area, not least some of the findings from the other foundation projects. We also want to experiment with digital tools and computational methods to create speculative identifications between different records, firstly within a test dataset from the Science Museum Group. And we're experimenting with combinations of things like named entity recognition, named entity linkage, and machine learning for various activities like classifying and clustering the data. But in keeping with the aims of the programme as a whole, we don't just want to link things within the Science Museum Group collections or from the Science Museum Group elsewhere. We also want to work on successively larger and more varied data sets over the course of the project. And that will be where the V&A collections come in soon. And finally, we want to develop an open source heritage connector prototype, which is capable of holding a web of links between object records and knowledge graphs like Wikidata. And we have been doing a lot of work with Wikidata at the moment because it's very open. There's an existing relationship between the Science Museum Group and the team at Wikidata, and it's an excellent way to get non-museum specialists involved in data creation and enhancement too. When we set up the project, it was very important to think about the different roles and responsibilities, and that we weren't just a partnership for the sake of it, but everybody is contributing to do a project that couldn't have been done otherwise, so that it becomes more than the sum of its parts. This is the broad breakdown. The Science Museum Group, of course, has expertise in the collections and an understanding of cultural heritage, digital architecture and infrastructures. And they're responsible also for the management and successful delivery of the project. At the University of London, as I mentioned, we're responsible for the literature review, but we're also contributing an understanding of digital humanities context and methods, particularly in relation to cultural heritage data, and trying to connect the two sectors together so that the best work in both of them has the opportunity to be in dialogue, which doesn't always happen, I think, particularly where we have separate publishing and dissemination channels. And we're not just working in silos or in parallel, we do also work together on the project, which is very important. So the joint activities are the evaluation of computational methods against key criteria, effectively co-design of the heritage connector, engagement with stakeholders, making sure that we reach the widest number of interested people possible, and the dissemination of results, including joint authoring of a final report, which all of the projects will be doing. Our outputs to date are an open Zotero library. I gave a presentation about this project about a month ago and we had 105 items and we've now got 147. And we've been very careful not just to look at academic articles, but we're also including blog posts, conference presentations and so on, so that we're really capturing writing about record linkage and data linkage wherever you can find it. We have a project blog, and we had a webinar on Wikidata and cultural heritage collections, which ran a couple of months ago now. The recordings are still available via the project blog, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that webinar later on. And there's also a lot of code on GitHub. Jamie and Callion have been very busy, and that will be there available to be shared with other people to use and build on even after the lifetime of the project. And documentation of that code is incredibly important to make sure that other people can use it effectively, and it doesn't just end up being an output of our project that doesn't help other people. Thinking back to how we built the collaboration, which I know is something that a lot of you are concerned about at the moment in trying to build these partnerships, I was looking back through emails to try and trace the timeline for this, and it started in July 2017 when a workshop was organised at the Science Museum to develop research ideas for the AHRC collaborative doctoral studentships, and there was an open call for anyone, it was mainly within the London area I think, to come along and spend the afternoon talking to curators and other staff. And because of my research interests, I ended up on the table with the digital team, and we had some excellent discussions, threw away 3 ideas which turned out not to work, and the one that we ended up with became a studentship proposal, which was submitted in September with John Stack and Jessica Bradford. That was successful after peer review within the Science Museum Group, and in October 2018, Rhiannon Lewis started as a jointly supervised PhD student, and she's researching the sharing of images of SMG collections on social media. And you may remember her name from the slide outlining the team. It's been great to join up those dots, and the 6 hours a week that she is allowed to work as part of her AHRC funding, she's spending supporting the project and helping us to shape it, actually, because so much of it connects to her own research too. So there's no doubt about it that previous collaboration made it much easier to respond to the initial tank call, but it was a cold networking event which laid the foundations. And I know there's been speed dating and other opportunities to put people together who haven't necessarily worked with each other before, but it was certainly enormously profitable in my case to get involved with something like that, as well as finding out, even if nothing had come of it, it would have been great to learn more about the work of the Science Museum Group. What makes these kinds of projects work, and obviously it's a bit difficult to say when we're only a third of the way through whether it's working or not, but in putting it together, it's important to understand different contexts and drivers between universities and the cultural heritage sector. So all of the foundation projects are supporting the aims and goals of the wider TANK programme, which broadly means dissolving barriers between opening up and extending access to collections, benefiting diverse audiences across the UK, and providing evidence to support future investment. But within that, the IROs have specific institutional contexts and aims. For example, in our case, associated with the SMG's One Collection programme, which has involved newly photographing a lot of their collections ahead of moving them out of London. For researchers in universities, there's an opportunity to learn from experts in the cultural heritage sector and to have privileged access to digital collections and the people who know about them. And it's also a chance to adapt and evolve digital humanities methods and approaches and to publish new research. And that's really crucial for the university partners, is the opportunity to be able to write and publish new research. But coming into it as a researcher based in a university, these are not like a normal AHRC responsive mode project. They really do have to align with the aims of the programme and the aims of the IROs. In practical terms, how we set about working, we have weekly meetings of the SMG team and then monthly meetings of the whole project team. And that's been made a lot easier over the past few months by the fact that we're both using Microsoft Teams as institutions anyway, so haven't had to get into difficulties about restrictions around using Zoom and so on. All of the meetings were blocked into diaries at the start of the project to make sure that this becomes a standing item, and we have a pattern and a rhythm of when these meetings take place so that you know when you need to get particular blocks of work done. We also share code on GitHub and have been using Trello for project management and updates, particularly in relation to technical development work. So it doesn't matter how you like working, there is a tool or a way of doing it within this setup, we hope, that will work for everybody. If you don't like Trello, then you can do something, you can use GitHub instead. And I think it's important that everybody engages with any of the tools that are being used, otherwise you end up doing twice as much work emailing around the side to get things done. We've also been fostering openness at all stages of the project. So that's not just about open outcomes, it's about being open about how we're working and being open within the team. And that means often challenging our own disciplinary and sectoral assumptions and asking lots of questions of ourselves and each other. It is a cliche, but there really isn't any such thing as a stupid question when you're working across different sectors and you don't understand acronyms or you don't know why it's important for somebody to get a particular output from the research. So setting out that environment at the start when nobody minds asking has worked really well for us, I think. And it's helped us to develop common understandings and a common language around the project, and also to acknowledge differences where that's necessary. So we're really working very hard to keep everyone in the loop, and that's particularly important at the moment, as I don't have to tell you, even if that means a lot of emails and GitHub notifications. I can see how very busy Kalyan and Jamie are on a daily basis for the number of GitHub notifications that come into my inbox. On coronavirus challenges, I've hinted at this a little bit. We've been relatively lucky, I think, and the project hasn't been adversely affected by furlough, which I know is not the case for all of the projects. And we were allowed to proceed with advertising for a new developer post, which happened in April, and to interview using Microsoft Teams. So we were able to get the whole team in place. But there's no doubt about it, a virtual meeting still can't replicate the experience of getting everyone together in a room around a whiteboard. And there are lots of pieces of software that try to do that. Mural is one that I know a lot of my colleagues use, but it just isn't the same as having people sparking off ideas, grabbing a pen from someone and adding to a diagram on a whiteboard. So I do miss that, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to put our project together when we were in the same room, but we're all having to think of different ways to do that now. And the planned programme of workshops has also had to be rethought, because we're certainly not going to be bringing everyone together in central London anytime soon. But there have been some benefits to working virtually. It's been easier to organise diaries and bring people together online than it would ever have been to arrange face-to-face meetings, even though both of the partner institutions are based in London. And that I know that from how difficult it was to get PhD appointments together for our PhD students when we were meeting face-to-face. So that's been easier. And we've actually benefited, I think, from rethinking our events. The first project was transformed into a seminar with international reach in terms of both audience and speakers. And more people as a result know about the project and about the wider TANK programme than would have been the case if we'd just got 20 people together in South Kensington. So we had 296 delegates online for 2 hours on a Friday afternoon to talk about linked open data, which is not a sentence that I had imagined ever saying. We got some really good engagement, and we had 8 speakers, some of whom were international. So that's been a real plus. But we also have a greater understanding of the concerns and requirements of stakeholders, thanks to the use of audience polling software. We used Mentimeter, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a moment. And this wide online engagement has definitely strengthened existing partnerships, for example, with the Wikidata team, who were able to attend in numbers rather than having one person coming along to a meeting physically. So I don't know if any of you have used Mentimeter before, but you poll the audience and the results come up in real time. And if the meeting host is sharing their screen, everybody can see what's coming through. So location, this was enormously encouraging for us to see this. London and Edinburgh and Cambridge are very big in the centre, but essentially in a lovely alliterative way, we have people from Brasilia to Brisbane, so all sorts of different time zones coming together to talk about the project and linked data. We also got an insight into the types of collections that the delegates were working with and the huge variety, which is definitely something for us to think about, because that makes that challenge of connecting things even harder when you see this spread of types of collection. And finally, we had pages and pages of qualitative data about the biggest hurdle to people in adopting Wikidata IDs. This page is relatively representative in terms of, talks about time and resources, approval from the institution, institutional traction, didn't really understand whether it was relevant, and poor quality and patchy data. So there's quite a lot there that we can study to look at the barriers and opportunities within institutions for working with projects of this kind. So that's everything from me, and I hope the references are useful, and the Zotero Open Library, again, I hope will be a useful resource for people who would like to find more about linked open data generally, but also about our project. Thank you very much.